Some babies are born into calm, others arrive in the heart of a storm. Leo came into the world weeks ahead of schedule. He was tiny, a fragile body wrapped around a fierce will to live. For days, he lay in the incubator, his little form surrounded by wires, monitors beeping, screens blinking. His family called him the silent warrior. But while Leo fought in the hospital, someone else was waiting for him back home. Not a person, but a quiet presence in a corner of a house he had never seen. His name was Nero, a striking Doberman, big, still, mysterious. He didn't bark, he didn't run, he didn't make a sound. He simply watched. Nero had sensed the tension in Leo's parents. He didn't understand why, but he knew something had changed. Some emotions don't need words to be understood. And in those days, Nero waited. Leo's treatment took weeks. When the doctors finally said he could go home, his parents were overjoyed and also warned to be extremely careful. Leo's lungs were still weak, his immune system fragile. Even holding him required caution. His little body still carried the marks of survival. On the first day Leo came home, Nero stood at the door. No one told him, but he knew. Someone new was arriving, and this someone was not ordinary. When Leo was placed in his crib, Nero approached quietly. No barking, no tail wagging, just a stillness. He stopped, lowered his head, and stared, not with fear, but with something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, as if they had met before. That night, Nero never left Leo's room. He didn't step near the crib, but he lay at the door until morning. He didn't answer any calls. It was as if he understood. His mission had begun. Leo's first days at home passed in silence. His parents watched every breath, held their own breath with every tiny movement. The house was so quiet, it almost felt fragile. But Nero shared that silence. During the day, he stood in the corner of the living room, never entering Leo's room, but always just outside the door, listening. He never looked away when Leo cried. He never closed his eyes. He never touched him, because this bond wasn't built on contact. It was built on trust, a quiet kind of trust, formed from a respectful distance. As days passed, Leo's movements grew. He kicked, he reached. His gaze became steadier, his breathing calmer. And Nero moved slightly closer, not much, just enough. Closer to the edge of the doorway, still careful, still aware. Because sometimes love isn't about moving in, it's about holding your place. Then, one morning, Leo giggled. It was his first real smile, and Nero was there, in the room. They didn't meet eyes, they didn't touch. But something passed between them, something quiet, something certain. Leo might not have known what it meant, but Nero did. Leo wasn't alone anymore. Over time, Leo began to find his voice. He made new sounds, reached out with tiny hands, leaned toward everything around him. The strength in his little body was slowly waking up, but the world was still far too big for him. One morning, after being lifted from the crib, he lay quietly on the floor. And then, something shifted. He pushed himself forward, just a little. And for the very first time, he crawled. His parents were thrilled, but another pair of eyes in the room watched even more closely. Nero. Nero didn't rush in. He didn't block. He didn't guide. He simply watched. But it wasn't just watching. It was as if he were mapping a path. When Leo crawled toward the door, Nero slowly stood. He didn't move aside, but he didn't get in the way either. He simply stood, like a boundary. Not in protest, but with a message. That's far enough. Not yet. Not today. Leo reached out with his small hand, gently touching Nero's front paw, not with force, but with curiosity. And then he stopped, sat down. For the first time, he sensed the limits of the world around him. Nero tilted his head slightly, brought himself to Leo's eye level, and waited. No bark, no movement, just presence. Some people raise their voices when they say no to a child. Nero didn't need to. He said it, with stillness. Every time Leo crawled, he looked for Nero. And every time, Nero was already there. As the months passed, Leo's hands grew stronger, his eyes sharper. He wasn't just crawling anymore. He was exploring. He responded to voices, studied faces longer, the chair in the corner, the toy on the carpet, and Nero, waiting in his usual spot, But now, Leo's gaze lingered. It was as if his eyes were asking, "Who are you? You're always here, but why don't you speak?" Nero stayed calm, kept the same distance. But one thing changed. He no longer looked away. When Leo came close, he allowed the boy to rest his hand on his paw. One day, Leo picked up a stuffed bear, carried it slowly to Nero. He didn't say a word, didn't hold it up, just placed it in front of him, as if to say, "Let's play." That same day, after a family lunch, Leo spoke his very first sound. Nah. It didn't mean anything yet, not in any language, but he only said it while looking at Nero. His parents were surprised. They had repeated dozens of words to him for weeks. But this first attempt at speech, was for his silent friend. Maybe it wasn't a name, maybe just a sound. But Leo knew exactly who it was for. Nero lifted his head. They locked eyes. Leo again. Nah. And Nero slowly lowered his head. That moment was never forgotten. Because it wasn't just a sound, it was a silent pact. Leo no longer saw Nero as a shadow. He saw him as his very first friend. Then came a sudden fever. Leo's breathing grew rapid, his cheeks flushed. Without hesitation, his parents rushed him to the hospital. It was chaos, doors opening, coats flying, bags packed, and through it all, Nero didn't move. He just watched, frozen. That night would be the first without Leo, and the house felt hollow. He didn't touch his food, didn't go to bed, didn't leave the door. When darkness fell, Nero didn't seek light. He waited, as if listening for a heartbeat outside the walls, as if any second now, the door would open, and Leo would return. And in the morning, it did. Leo was in his father's arms, tired, but safe. Nero rose quietly. He didn't bark, didn't run. He just walked forward and gently touched Leo's foot with his nose, then let out a deep breath. Some nights, love isn't loud. It's just silent waiting, and it speaks loudest, without a single sound. Leo began to stand, short, shaky, but full of intent. He held onto furniture for balance, sometimes staying up, sometimes landing softly on the floor. But there was always one constant, Nero, just a few steps behind, not guiding, not pushing, just there. One day, Leo stood alone in the middle of the hallway, hands lifted, eyes locked forward, ready for his first step. But before he moved, he turned, and there he was, Nero, not too close, not too far, exactly where he needed to be. Leo stepped, 1, 2, and just as he began to fall, Nero moved. He didn't touch him, but he adjusted his stance, his body forming an invisible wall. Leo stopped. He didn't fall. He didn't cry, because someone caught him, without ever making contact. Some children take their first steps with a parent. Leo's were taken in the shadow of a dog, and that shadow became his strongest support. Spring arrived. The windows stayed open longer. Birdsong filled the air, and Leo was walking now. Wobbly, determined steps, from one corner of the room to the next. But that day was different. He was going outside, to the garden, to feel the earth. At the door, his mother stopped him. No shoes, just bare feet against the soil. Cool, software alive. Leo stepped forward, carefully, balancing, and behind him, a shadow. Nero, not leading, not correcting, just walking with him. Leo spotted a flower, bent down, reached out, and Nero stepped closer. He sniffed the flower, then looked at Leo. Their shadows touched in the sunlight. One light, one heavy, but moving in the same direction. They didn't play that day. They didn't run. They just stood, side by side, learning what it means to simply be, without words, without sound. The boy discovered the world, and the dog discovered the light inside the boy. Time passed, seasons turned. Leo was no longer a baby. He ran, he spoke, he filled the house with laughter. But one thing never changed. Nero. He moved slower now, paused before climbing stairs, carried a little more gray in his coat, and a lifetime in his eyes. As Leo's steps quickened, Nero's patience deepened. They played together, toys scattered, balls tossed, but it was always the quiet moments that meant the most. Leo would sit by the window, watching the world. Nero would lean against him, silent, still, as if they already knew everything that didn't need to be said. Leo learned many words as he grew, but very few were for Nero, because some bonds don't need words. Every morning, before Leo woke, Nero waited at his door. Every night when Leo went to bed, Nero followed. It wasn't routine, it wasn't duty, it was something more. One day Leo said, "My best friend doesn't talk, but I always hear him." As time lifted Leo up, it gently slowed Nero down. The dog who once stood to catch him now leaned into Leo for support, his body lower, his eyes softer, but Leo, always by his side. One morning, Nero struggled to walk. Leo knelt beside him, placed his hand on the same strong paw he once held as a baby. This time, he was the one offering strength. "He was my first friend," he told his mother. "Maybe I learned to talk before him, but I learned to trust when I looked into his eyes." From then on, Leo became Nero's shadow. They walked slowly through the garden. Leo sat beside him in silence, watched over him, the way he was once watched over. Nero couldn't run anymore, but in Leo's heart, his place never changed. Once a shadow, now a tree that needed sunlight, and Leo never stopped sitting beneath it. Thank you for being part of this story. If it touched your heart, let it live on. Like, subscribe, and stay with us for more love, more silence, more meaning.